Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Sticky Notes for this week. So basically, I thought that I would put together this one um, as a bit of a different one, really, to normal. Because normally, what we do is we present something that we know and we want other people to sort of learn and everything else. I thought this one would be quite fun to do it a bit more interactively. It might take a bit longer than 15 minutes, this one, so we're probably looking at about half an hour or so. But yeah, I thought it'd be fun to try a new thing. So I noticed that auto layout in Figma is one of those things that's not universally well used actually across the industry. So Figma obviously is a not a new design tool. It's been around for a little while, um, but it's quite heftily and heavily used by UI designers in particular because of some of the really clever features that it can do around creating responsive designs and ones that are much more easy for you to build sort of atomic design solutions where you're thinking about little interactions. Maybe you create a button or a component and you're able to cascade that across your design really nice and quickly. It's something that some of the older solutions like Photoshop just are not very good at all. You have to do them very, very manually. And we'll kind of go through how auto layout works and why the benefit of auto layout is that you can do all these things over something like a sort of normal layout in Figma. So the first thing is I've got an actual Figma file that you can have a play with. So if everyone in the room, so for anybody that's on the stream, so basically we've got a few people in the room who actually I think I can show. Yeah, there you go. On our clever little 360-degree owl, you can kind of see like up in that corner, everybody in the room. There you go, wave everyone. Um, so yeah, we've got a few people in the room. So for those of you in the room and those of you at home, head to that URL. So it's bit.ly/learn-auto-layout-with-the hacksaw. So learn auto layout with the hacksaw, and what you will find is a Figma file. That Figma file, it's called a community file, and what it means is that you can make a copy of that file into your own Figma space, and you can then play along as we go along. So I'm going to be using the same file, but I'm going to have my own version, and you can basically do whatever you like with that file to your heart's content. And it means you can keep it. So if you actually want to see how I've made auto layout work in that file, you can have a play and you can see how it works, but you can also try it yourself in there as well. So I'll give you a few minutes for those on the stream to kind of get logged into Figma. If you haven't got a Figma account, I believe you can make one for free. So when you follow that link, you should be able to create one for free and set it up and everything else. If you don't want to play along, that's absolutely fine. You can still view the file, no problem, and you can just watch on YouTube if you want to as well. So yeah, cool. Should we get into it? Marvelous. First of all, who in the room has used auto layout before? Yeah. So 2, 3. It kind of, yeah. So marvelous. So auto layout is basically a way. Oh, and Katie, you have apparently. Yeah. Well, and again, so it's possible you might have used auto layout and not actually known, because if a designer has already created a layout that uses auto layout, it might be that you've edited an auto layout page, but you didn't realize that was what you were doing. Because it's actually integrated so nicely into Figma, you might not have even known that's what you were doing. So also, for those in the room, if you want to ask questions and stuff, there's a mic on the table. Just pick it up as you do it. So in case anybody on the stream wants to hear your question, I'll try and repeat it as well. But grab the mic and chat away. And I'm quite happy to take questions as we go as well. Okay, so let's get into it. Learning Figma, auto layout, the basics and that. This is actually a Figma page that I have started on, not a slide. So let's scroll down to our first part. So I have created a nice little card. So this is what you might find in a design for something, let's say like a blog or a shop, something like that. And this might be a book or a piece of content. And the idea is that we've got a picture, we've got a title and maybe a subtitle or an author. We've got a bit of description text and a price and maybe a button. Now, if I want to edit this page, normally what I would have to do is what you would have to do in something like Photoshop or Illustrator or so on, where I'd have to actually move a lot of things manually. So let's say, for example, that I want to remove a bunch of this text and I want to change the blurb. Now, if I change the blurb and I remove a chunk of text, what you'll notice is we're left with a massive gap of white space. So now for me to remove that white space and make this look a little bit neater, what I've got to do is I've got to find the rectangle, which is the box surrounding all the content, and I've got to move, oh no, hang on, no, because if I move it, actually these elements aren't going to come with it. And now I don't even remember how much space there was between this button and this end. So, okay, I better undo that. Let's find out how much space there is between these two things first. So if I hold Alt, I can then see the difference between items. So I can see that there is 30 pixels between the corner of the box and the call to action. Okay, so I've got it now, it's 30 pixels. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these items, going to select them all manually. I'm going to move this up here. I don't know where it should be here, so maybe there. And then I'm going to fiddle about with this box. Now, what was it, 30 pixels? So I've got to try and make, oh, I was close, 31. So now I can make it a little bit smaller. And maybe it's about where it was before. So it's a real fiddle just for me to change that. Oh, but hang on a minute. I was meant to put this tag in there. Okay, so if I want the tag to go underneath this text, okay, so I need it to go underneath this text here. Yeah, see now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to move this text. And now I'm going to have to move these items as well. So I'm going to have to select them manually or group them or whatever. Okay, but now that's out of line. And you can see that immediately I'm having to just do lots of manual tasks in order to edit what is really basic design. This is how we've been doing it for years. So for a very, very long time, before things like Autolayout existed, and there are some other tools that do similar things. Before these sorts of things existed, this was how design worked. We had to fiddle and fart around with individual components within individual components so that we could get layouts looking right. And it introduces inconsistency. It means that now I have no idea how much space there is between these items. It's probably now going to cause me to have to go through everything and make sure I've got it all right. And it just becomes a massive pain in the ass. So introducing auto layout. So if you scroll to the right, of your screen, what you will find is a with auto layout version. So what I've done is I've created a new version of the exact same card. So you'll notice that all of the elements are exactly the same. We still have the image, text, and a bit of author text. We've got a description, and we've got some elements at the bottom. So we've got the pricing, and we've got the buy now button. But this time round, if I change this text here, when I change it, you notice that the card has kept all of those individual spacing between each of the items. It also knows how much space there should be at the end here. So it's maintained that 30 pixels around the outside. And it means that my design is still nice and consistent. And now if I want to add those tags in, I can create a new element here, and I've got a series of tags inside a little group, and I can just drop it in, and it will automatically know how much spacing there should be between that item and items around it, and it will even resize the rectangle as well. So immediately my time is saved and the design is still nice and consistent. So how does this actually work? Well, Autolayout actually basically has a few different options to it. And what I've done here is I've described it visually so you can see all of the parts of this part of this card and how it actually works within Autolayout. But we're going to come back to that because I think this sort of description is a little bit complicated because there's lots of moving parts in this one card. So we're going to go really nice and simple. So if you scroll down a little bit, you will find some buttons. So on the left-hand side here, we've got two buttons. And I'm going to open up my inspect panel as well so that you can see what I'm looking at. So the top button here is something which I've designed which does not have any auto layout on it at all. Now it's a group, which means that we've got an icon on the left, we have a bit of text on the right, and it's grouped together, and the group itself has a blue background and it's got a bit of border radius on it to give it a nice curve. Now if I want to change this button, what you'll find is this happens. So the text in the middle is centered, but as soon as I start to edit it, the layout isn't maintained, and I've now got this horrible mess that I've got to try and work out on this button. The one underneath is an auto layout version. So in order for us to make this nice and easy for us to change in the future, all we actually need to do is apply auto layout to this group. So in the one below, what I've done is I've literally clicked the auto layout button, and all that's done is applied all the options for me automatically. And in this little pane on the right hand side, you can see you've got auto layout here, it's actually applied all the options that I've kind of already said that I want it to have. So in the group above, what I'd actually done is I'd set it in the middle. So this text here has got a sort of spacing of 13 pixels at the top and the bottom. And the icon and the text have also got spacing around the outsides of about 28 pixels. And because they're in a group, when I've applied auto layout, what it's actually done is it's automatically created those options for me. So you can see under vertical padding, it's got 13 pixels of vertical padding. And on horizontal padding, it's got 28 pixels of horizontal padding. And what this means is that this group, anything inside it, will always have that space around the outside on the tops and bottoms. And then this one up here is space between. So if you've got two or more items within an auto layout component, what we want to do is tell auto layout how much space to give items between each item. And again, it's automatically detected that the space between these two items is 14 pixels. So it's done that for me. So in clicking auto layout, I've created a button that is immediately responsive, which means I don't need to do anything else at all. It's actually worked it out for me automatically. So it can be as easy as that. Let's head along to the next example. So obviously, if we've got multiple buttons here, these buttons are all auto layout buttons. So they've all got the same options. They've got 13 pixels of vertical padding, they've got 28 pixels of horizontal padding, and they've got a little bit of spacing between the items as well. So each of these is actually the same auto layout. But let's say that I actually need to change the wording of one of these items. So I need to change this one to favorite. So let's do that on the top. And you can see that immediately I now have a problem because this item is auto layouting, which is very nice, and it's expanding the size of the button, but it's actually gone behind this one here, which now means I have to play around with the layout and I have to make it work again. So how might we actually make this work better together? Well, it's nice and easy, because if I select all of those three items and I group them together, and then on that group, I click auto layout, you can see that now it's automatically applied all those same settings. So it detected that there was 10 pixels of spacing between each of the items, and it's applied that for me. Didn't need any padding because there's nothing around that group. And so now I can start typing and I automatically have a nice auto layout series of buttons. So it's as easy as that, really. And you can see how auto layout, when you actually put auto layout elements inside other auto layout elements, you get this really powerful way of building out layouts. So you can have a play with this yourselves and you can actually see what kind of auto layouts you can make. The other nice thing about auto layout is what we've looked at so far is horizontal auto layout. So we've just said all these items are in this long list and we just want you to sort of lay them out horizontally. If I actually wanted to stack these buttons, all I need to do is switch this button here in auto layout. So I just need to tell it, instead of going horizontally, I'd actually rather you stack them vertically. And if I click that button, it does it for me. And so now if I add another item, it will automatically stack them like so. So auto layout's actually an incredibly simple series of these four are the main options, really. It's the direction, it's the spacing between the items in your group, and then it's the padding around the items in your group. And as long as you set those three things, you can basically have a really nice auto layout. The other option on here is this here. So this is the sort of, it's the alignment capability within auto layout. And what this allows you to do is decide from what direction you would like things to start stacking. So let's say, for example, we have got these three items here, these three buttons, and they're inside a grey panel. Now what we want to do is have them together, auto layout in this group. So if we group them together and click auto layout, you can see that the outer box has automatically snapped itself around the buttons. So now if we start typing, the box comes with us. And it's just as you'd expect. Everything is now auto layouting on that nice horizontal. But if we wanted to actually have an outer box like this that's bigger. But we actually wanted the buttons to sit on the right-hand side of this box. How would we do that? Because at the moment, auto layout is just doing a horizontal stack. We've just told it we want to go horizontally, we want this space between each item. And so that's what it's doing for us. It's starting on the top left and it's stacking each item from the top left like that. So if we want all of these elements to actually sit on the right-hand side instead, once we've set our auto layout, it's really nice and easy because all we need to do is change the alignment. And if we tick one of these, instead of us stacking from the left-hand side, it goes, all right, I'll stack them from the middle on the right. And so now if we add a new item, it will do that too. And it means that we now have a change of direction within auto layout. So any questions so far? What would you like me to cover off again? Because I know this is a lot of stuff. I want to give you the overview first and then have a play with things. Go on, Katie. Katie's laughing her head off, so...
I am not asking my questions.
Why not? Please do, because I imagine your question will probably be something that other people will be asking as well. Go on, grab the mic. I think also for people that haven't designed before, this might be quite a lot to take in one go.
Yes. So, one, padding.
Yes.
Right. So everyone's like, oh, add a bit of padding. But you talking about like padding, because the way I understand it is like there's kind of, you have padding on the text in your buttons there.
Yeah.
So like there, it's aligned somehow, but it goes like within.
Yeah.
And then you have padding between. What are you, like between elements that you might have like grouped, what are you auto layouting, or are you auto layouting at all?
So inside a group, so let's take one of these buttons as an example, right? Go to this like button here. So this like button is made up of basically three things, yeah? So we've got the icon itself, which is actually extending out to the bounds of the icon, but ignore that for now. The idea is that you've got an icon, which is one element. So that's like a rectangle.
Yeah.
We've got this text here, which is also a rectangle. And then we have the outer box that contains everything. And that is also a rectangle. Now, the outer box is basically what you apply the auto layout to. So that is what you're saying. Everything inside this group, so the box plus all the bits inside it, I want you to do an auto layout, please.
Okay.
And then what happens is you've got different padding depending on what you're looking at. So your rectangle, the outer space on the edges is your padding. So where you can see, and it's really nice because actually Figma shows you the padding on this as well. So as you roll over an auto layout group, you get this nice sort of red hashing, and you can see that there is the padding at the top and the bottom, and that there is the padding on the left and right. So that's your horizontal padding and your vertical padding. And then with your elements inside your auto layout, so you might have your star and your like, and maybe even another bit of text or whatever you like, that's your spacing between your items. So you're basically creating a container and then you're just putting things into that container. And each of those things has just got space between it. So you could have text, 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 and then just say, I want 10 pixels of spacing between each bit. And that's
so
what it will do.
Alternating between padding and spacing, those are the same things?
They basically are.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why they're called different things, but it's basically space between items and padding around the outside of the items.
Okay.
The actual reason I think they call it padding and spacing is because in HTML and CSS, when you create like a layout, so you create a rectangle or something, or a div or whatever your component is, padding is what is used to give it space between the sort of border of the element and the things inside it. So it actually mirrors what you do in HTML and CSS. It's actually trying to mirror it really closely. And actually, if you're a developer, you might be seeing this on the stream, and if you are familiar with CSS, you'll notice that this is basically CSS. What we're designing here is padding for an element, which is CSS, really. Yeah.
Okay. How does it work with design systems and components?
I'm really glad you asked that, because we are going to come to that very shortly.
Okay. Next question. How am I meant to know what all the buttons are? They don't in Figma. That's the thing that I struggle with. I understand the concept of it,
Yeah.
but it's not language I use, and all
So
of the buttons.
that's a really good point. So there are two ways actually of manipulating this, and I actually think one is easier than the other. So if you're looking at something like a button, for example, let's go to one of our simpler examples down here. So this buy now button. In this buy now button, we have got this spacing between items, and as you roll over, you do get a little tooltip within Figma. Can you see it on the screen? Yeah. So you've got spacing between items, and then you've got horizontal padding and vertical padding, and then you've got your horizontal direction, vertical direction, and it even tells you about alignments as well. So you do get a little bit of help when you're looking at auto layout sort of options. But the other nice thing is, if you actually look at your component, so this is the component that has auto layout on it, when you roll over, you get these little pink anchors appear on the, can you see them on the screen?
Yeah.
And the idea is that these are showing you those same things, but overlaid over your component. So actually, if I wanted to change the padding here, I could do it by either clicking and dragging. So I could say, okay, well, this bottom padding here, where are we? Click on that component. There you go. Bottom padding. I want to actually change the bottom padding to 21 or 20 and actually change the one at the top as well. And you can see it's reacting in real time as I do it.
Yeah.
And that's quite nice. And you could do the same with spacing as well. So actually spacing, and this is really useful because often designers won't quite get it right first time and you need to play with these options. So actually being able to just manipulate it directly on your design is super, super handy. So yeah, you can actually play with them in there as well. You can even, if you click onto them, you get this little edit. So if you are trying to get an exact number, you can click and just say, I want that to be 12, and it will do that for you as well. So very, very handy.
Okie dokie.
So that is most of your options that you need around the way auto layout works. The other thing we've only touched on really is that these auto layout options are using what's known as the hug contents vertical resizing option or horizontal resizing option as well. And the idea is that there are 3 different options for how a component can resize into its auto layout component. So for example, we've got this little block here that we've made with these 3 items. And at the moment, what's happening is each of these auto layout components is hugging the content. So what it's doing is the box is saying all of the elements inside it, add up all of the width of those items, and then whatever the container is, just hug the width of that container. And I don't want you to be any bigger. And so what that means is you've got this nice sort of neat set of buttons that look like they are the right size. The padding matches, and each of those elements are all nice and tidy. But there are other options. So if, for example, this item, we don't actually want it to expand any further than this size, right? We always want it to be exactly that width. We can actually change one of those options as well. So above the auto layout, you can see these resizing options. So if I were to decide to change that to fixed width, what it does is it gives me this width option back so I can determine, okay, I want that to be 130 pixels. And then if I were to manipulate this, you can see that the actual width of the component is no longer changing. Obviously, in most instances, this actually makes things quite difficult for you to use within auto layout because you've then got an element that's always going to be a fixed size. So you have to be quite careful about how you use this stuff, but it can be really powerful if you have things like an icon that's always going to be a fixed width. You can actually then set your fixed width, and you'll see why this is useful in a second, because actually other things can then be manipulated around it, but that thing's always going to stay the same. One other nice little trick that I found in here is if you also change the text option, and this is an advanced for any designers watching that have used this stuff before, there's a really nice advanced option in here that allows you to do something quite smart. So if you go to your type settings for a piece of text, you can actually change the way that type specifically resizes. And one of those options is to truncate text. So if the text becomes too long for the component width, it will truncate that width for you, right? Now, the really cool thing is, if you then say, I want to fill the container, you can see here where the container hits a certain size. If your text is longer than that, it will automatically truncate that text for you. So like works, but if I were to say favorite, it will automatically truncate that text from we. It's really, really powerful, that. And especially when you have components that you've made in Figma and you're actually cascading those components out, you might be changing the content. If you can truncate your text automatically, it's really, really good. Okay, so let's say we've got that hugging now instead. Change that back. So we've got our components as we want them. Now, at the moment, we've only looked at hugging. So we've only looked at making all these auto layout components hug each other. What if in this layout, this is, let's say, a mobile design, and what we want is for this buy now button to be as big as possible and for the other buttons to just fit how they should fit alongside it. What if we wanted to do that instead? Because at the moment, all it's doing is it's stacking up those buttons in the size that they are, in that hugged size. We can actually do that using these vertical size options. So let's say what we want here is we want the like button to stay that size, to fit the width of like, and we want that share button to do the same thing as well. But we want this buy now button to stretch to meet the rest of the space available in that box. How we would do that is, within this component, we grab that one and we go up to our horizontal resizing options and we say fill container. And you can see here what that's done is that has automatically resized only that component to fill all of the available space that it has. And what's really cool about this is you can do this with multiple objects within an auto layout group. So let's say we wanted 2 of these to do the same thing. If I were to do that with the share button as well, something interesting happens. Both of these options are now basically the same size. And what they're doing is they've calculated how much space is available, and they are both filling that space. And it's really cool because it means that you can create responsive layouts with different options within that auto layout to do some really cool things. So here we've now got a component that should, if I've made it right, automatically, where are we, fill, and that is fixed, yeah, should automatically respond as I change the width. And we have now made an automatically responsive design that would work in a mobile screen. And that's the power of Figma Auto Layout over something like Photoshop. So let's go back to our card that we were looking at earlier. And we're going to look at components very shortly as well. So how does this card actually work? Because we've got multiple things going on here. And we can actually break this down into individual little things and see how it works. So we've got an image, we've got a bit of text, 2 bits of text actually. We've got our tags, which I'll actually remove just so we've got that for simplicity. We've got a bit of description text, and we've got our block at the bottom with buy now button, and we've got some pricing. So what actually is happening here, if we start typing in here and we create a bunch of new content, you can see that the card is expanding like so. And if we were to change this text here, you'll see that the card expands. And so on. Now this one here, you'll see is a fixed height, and it's because we don't want that to get any bigger. So this one here is automatically truncating. But this here it's actually within its own auto layout group. So we have got a series of nested auto layout groups here. The big one here is an auto layout that goes vertically down, like so. It's got a bit of fixed pixel space between each item of 20 pixels. So you can see how that works there with the little red hatching, which is quite neat. I'll zoom in a bit so that you can see that better. So between each of those elements, we've got this 20 pixels of spacing. We've also got some padding around the outside, like so. But what's interesting is this here is one component, that's a group. And that is also an auto layout component by itself. And inside that auto layout component, it has no spacing. So we're actually hugging those 2 elements together. And what that gives you is this effect where you've got the title and the author being really closely linked with the adjacency effect. So those 2 things look like they're really close, and they are, the subject and the subject, what's the word I'm looking for? Title and subject, or the sort of subheader and header. or genre or author and that sort of thing. But those two things are much more adjacent. But actually, we're still maintaining that nice auto layout. It means that we don't have to do that manually because we just set that the once, and we can still leave it to auto layout within the bigger auto layout component around it. So this is basically what we've got, is we've got an image, and this has got a fixed height here. So that's what that is. We've got the next group here, which is hugging that content. We've got this group here, which is hugging that content as well. And then we've got this group here, which is hugging that content. And because of that, it then creates your nice auto layout card.
I've got a question.
Go for it.
So if I have a series of components, say a bunch of buttons, but one of them does something terrible, it deletes what I've got there, and I want that to be as far away from the other buttons as possible so people don't click it accidentally. Is there a way I could do that?
There absolutely is. So there are two ways I would say you could do it. So that's a really nice example, actually. So let's say in these three, let's get rid of our fill container and we'll do hug contents instead. And this one is going to be a delete button, right? So I'm actually going to go to Font Autumn and find ourselves a nice, because I can't do this half-assed. I've got to find all of the right options, right? Yeah, exactly. There we go. So we've got our delete button. And in fact, it's probably quite important that this one is a different color as well. So we don't want that button to be anywhere near the other buttons, just in case someone hits it and we didn't want them to. There are a couple of ways of doing this. So the first thing I would say is think about the grouping aspect of auto layout. So if you have got, for example, some buttons which are forward buttons, so things like next or commit or submit or buy now or whatever you like, they're normally on the right-hand side of your interfaces. And then your backward buttons or your cancels or your destructive buttons are normally on the left. And what that means is you've got the separation of two different things. You've got a left series of actions and a right series of actions. So the way I would do it is by doing this. So I would group all of my left actions like that, create a group called left. I would group all of my right actions in a group called right. And then in that frame, you've got auto layout defined. You would just say for the left group, I want you to, where am I? I want you to fill the container. And for the right group, I want you to do whatever. So it might be fill container or otherwise. But because I want these ones to sit on the right-hand side, with their auto layout, I want them to sit on the right, with their 10 pixels between each other. So I've now set this as an individual auto layout group. It's already sat on the right-hand side because it's inside an auto layout group. And it is telling those items inside it, start on the right and stack that way. And then I do the same thing in the opposite direction on the left. So my left items, I've got auto layout there. I set them on the left-hand side with their 10 pixels. And I now have two separate nice calls to action area. Left ones, which are bad, right ones, which are good, move forwards. And I've got a nice sort of separation between those two items. So that's the way I would do it. And it's normally because I like to structure things in that way. There are ways that you can do it in something called your spacing mode. So I've seen this done a couple of times as well. I don't like this too much because I think you actually have less control this way, but you can do this. So I'm going to ungroup those. And I'll put that button back inside there. Oh yeah, so we've just got this one frame. So there we go. So we've got all our buttons back. Now, one thing you can do is you can change the spacing mode, because by default, your auto layout is in what's known as packed spacing mode. And what that means is just pack everything in from one side and just keep stacking like that. Sometimes you might not want that because you might just want things to be as spread out as far as possible. You want to fill the space as much as you can. And that's where space between comes in. And what that does is, instead of setting your spacing, it actually sets your spacing to auto. And what that means is that it will automatically just stretch the space between the items. All of your items are actually automatically set to be either fixed or hugging the contents, like so. You can see these are all either fixed or hugging. And then the space between them is automatic, which means now if I move that, it will automatically have share in the middle, buy now on the right, and delete on the left. So it's automatically done. I don't like this so much because I think it gives you less control, because unless you've only got 2 or 3 items, it actually becomes quite difficult to manage. But you can do things like if you've got, let's say, the bottom of a page might have previous actions, next actions, and maybe like a pagination or a label in the middle. That's quite nice because then you always have the right spacing between those elements. So you can use it, but I tend to use something like that. Cool. So finally, we're going to have a quick look at some more examples of auto layout cascades and stuff like that. So I've created a few items here. Now, to your point around components earlier, Katie, what I've actually done here is created a component. So this first one is a card component. And what component, we can always cover components at a different time, but what components are in Figma they are basically a defined object. So you set up an object once and you say, these are all of the things in that object. So this one has all of those elements. It's got an image, bit of text, it's got an author, tags, description, etc. And you set up all the options for the auto layout within that component as well. And the nice thing is you only have to do it once, because then you create instances of that component later on. So this is the component itself. So this is the card. And then this is an instance of that component. And this is what we would generally call either component-based or atomic or whatever design, because it allows you to sort of build things up. So if I were to edit something on here, for example, it would actually change the items in my instances as well, like so. I'm changing the core component here, and it's cascading those changes throughout my instances. Now, what you notice is, because I've applied auto layout in this, I've actually grouped these 3 things together, and they've got a nice consistent spacing between them. But what we've also seen is it's really annoying because at the bottom, they don't quite line up at the bottom here. We've got this annoying little, each one is slightly different. It's very, very annoying. So what we can do is, if we pick our original component, we can decide to change this to fill the container that it sits within. And if we do that, we see that all of the components now will match at the bottom. But now we have another problem because each of these read buttons doesn't quite match. So if we remember what we did just a minute ago, this element here sits at the bottom, and we always want it to sit at the bottom. So we can set our auto layout to have a bottom left alignment if we want to, but you can see that changes the sort of the components within it. But what we want that to do is always to sit at the bottom. So we can do this in one of 2 ways. We can either change this component itself to fill container, which, as you can see, has now adapted them. But the difficulty with this, of course, is that we would then have to change the auto layout alignment for them to sit at the bottom. And then what you get is the text inside it also is aligned at the bottom. It doesn't look great. So the other way you can do this is, instead of actually aligning this one or making this one fill container, we can actually do it with a different element instead. And because we know this text is always going to be slightly different size, that's the thing that's actually having the biggest impact, we can change that one to fill container. And immediately we can see that now all of these elements sit at the bottom, and all the text inside will just adapt to fit. So we've now got a nice list of 3 very random blog articles with random description content, all looking much nicer and neater. So that is your sort of very quick whistle-stop tour of auto layout in Figma. Any other questions or anything that I can help people with? Yeah, go on, Katie.
So I get how it works on a component like that. Do you have to do something special to make it work on like a whole page with like multiple components, and you're Oh, actually, I want my graph here, and then I want a table there, and then actually I'm going to like switch that out, and I'm going to drag this thing in here and have everything else
So
do that stuff.
I'm really glad that you asked that,
I'm asking great questions. Thank you.
because that is one thing that I haven't actually included, but I think is a brilliant, brilliant thing to say, which is there is nothing stopping you from creating an entire web page where everything in that web page is auto layout. And I love doing this because it allows you to make things really, really easy to manipulate in big layouts. So let's say you've got, a nav system here. You might have a title, like a page title here, which we will make a bit bigger so that people can actually see what I'm saying. There's a page title, and you've got all your different components. If you just like group them together and then set auto layout, and you say, well, I want them that size, I want them to always have a nice consistent 40 pixels between them, and I want them to always, fit the width and all this stuff. Absolutely, you can create an entire page of auto layout things. And the one thing I actually haven't covered is that another nice thing about auto layout is if you've got components that are in an auto layout, you can very quickly drag and drop them. So in this layout here, for example, where we've got these 3 components, I can just move them very quickly between each other. I can do the same with these tags, because these tags are also auto layout, which means if I just want them in a different order, I can quickly, he says, oh, it's because I'm in the wrong thing. Hang on. I can very quickly move them about like that as well, and they automatically do all that stuff. Imagine what that's like when you create a whole web page and you've got, all of your individual components, and you set up areas. So you might say, okay, for this e-commerce web page that I'm building, I always want the title to be here. I want the filtering section to be here. I want the pagination to be here. I want each of the product images to look like this. And you can really quickly go, I'm not sure about this layout. I'll just swap these things around. So absolutely, I would challenge you to try and build all of your web pages in a completely auto layout design if you can. It makes it much, much easier for you to sort of play with and redesign. And it's brilliant for component-based or atomic design because it means you can drag and drop things in. And for layouts, you could set a layout template even and just say, this is my page layout. This is what it always looks like. And then you have your series of components, which might be a text block, an image block, a this block, a that block. You just go drop, 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 and you've got your nice web page that's already made. So yeah, it's really, really powerful.
So I think if someone did that for me, then I could
yeah. So yeah, drag and drop. There you go. Well, yeah, and it does make you feel awesome if someone has created a page layout that is completely auto layout, and you just go in, drop that in, take that out. It feels great because it's like, your decision making is so much faster. Brilliant. Go on, Steve.
When using auto layouts, I see a huge benefit for using them with responsive designs. But what I didn't see is having different breakpoints for separate size devices.
Yeah.
Is there any way to sort of cope with that?
No. So the short answer is no. At the moment, there is no method by which we can set breakpoints within Figma and be able to sort of change layouts and things like that in Figma yet. What I have seen is there are a couple of interesting requests on things like the user forums for things like breakpoints, but also things like stacked design. So let's say, for example, these 3 components on here. If we were to add a 4th one in here, what do we think would happen? So if we add a 4th and the auto layout is horizontal, at the moment what it does is it adds it to the right. And that's not great because if we were to actually build that in HTML, what we would want is to set a maximum number of elements, which you can do in things like Flex. You can say, I want this sort of maximum width. I want it to have these rules. And we can't quite do that in Figma yet. But I have seen lots of people requesting it. And I think if I were Figma, I think that's what I'd be working on right now, is having a way to stack things and that sort of thing. So I think there's probably a few things coming down the line on Figma. I wouldn't be surprised if that is next. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there is a way to fully do breakpoints yet, unless anyone has anything that they've seen. No.
I mean, Adobe bought them, so probably take all this away.
I mean, yeah, let's see what happens with Adobe.
And in line with this, I assume there's no like maximum width either for things that you want to like fill the container up to a certain width and then stay that width, stuff like that.
You can set a fixed width. So, for example, this here, and actually you can do some quite clever stuff with fixed width. So this here, this group of cards that we have at the moment is just hugging the components within it. If we were to set a fixed width there and expand it a little bit, we can, I mean, it will just set that width, which means that, you know, the component itself is still there. This item is still technically inside that component. It's just sitting outside it. One thing you can do, though, is if you set that and then click on this clip content, it will actually clip anything that sits outside of that nice box, so you don't see those elements. So there are kind of ways that you can handle things like overflow, I guess you would call it. But yeah, other than that, that's sort of all it can really do at the moment, I think. Cool. Marvelous. I might just check the stream and see if anybody has any questions on the live stream. I'm not seeing anything on here, although our platform is pretty bad at like actually telling us the comments and things. But yeah, cool. Okay, marvelous. Well, I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other questions, or you've got any other thoughts, or anything I didn't cover that you'd like to hear more about, then yeah, please just like hit us up on one of the social channels, or like people in the room, just, you know, ping me on Slack or whatever you like. I want to see lots of really cool auto layout stuff, because I find it really, really exciting when people build really cool auto layouts and you're like, this just works amazingly. And I try and build it into everything I do. So if I ever create a new card, or, you know, something for any of our clients or any of our pieces of work, I'm always thinking, how can I auto layout this? I don't want to just build it once. I want to build it so that it's always auto layout, so that it's always got a nice responsive design to it. So if you can get into that method of thinking, I think you get a really, really nice result. Cool. Okay. Marvelous. All right. Well, in that case, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, everyone in the room. I'll show the camera again so you can wave. There you go. But yeah, so yeah, thanks to everyone for watching along as well at home. I hope you really enjoyed it. Yeah, leave us comments and things if there's anything else you want us to cover. Yeah, show us your cool auto layout stuff, please. I really want to see them. So yeah, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again soon for more sticky notes. Cheers. Bye.